Hi, welcome to a very brief training session on install observations. You're watching this probably or hopefully because you're about to do some install observations using the TeleTrackNavMan Lucidity form, whether that's on your mobile device or on a computer. This is a session designed to give an overview of why we're doing the form, how to do the form, to give you confidence in following this process through. It is important that you take this very seriously and follow the steps involved. And there's some reasons behind that that I'll go through. And hopefully, all questions will be answered and you feel confident going forward. So, first point to make is to discuss why we do audits. Why do we audit? We have to do install observations for a few reasons. Number one, it's part of our ISO 45001 certification, which is critical for a lot of the tenders we seek and the customers we have. It's also an important best practice standard for safety. The ISO standard requires us to manage our contractor network. It requires us to control, to the extent that we have control, uh, the safety of all workers, whether they're contracted or directly employed, subcontractors of contractors, everyone in between. This means we have a duty of care that runs to everybody who we encounter in our working lives, even other road users, all to the extent that we have control over their safety. We have a lot of control over contractor safety because we're giving them the contract to do this work for us. And so part of that standard requirement is that we check that they're competent people to do our work. This is also critical for quality standards as well, because we don't want to be represented by someone who works in a poor manner and leaves a safety issue for the worker or the end user. So that's there. That's not just out in the blue on its own as someone has come up with. It's a great idea. That's based on the WHS legislation. And there is difference between legislation in Australia. There's a different law in Victoria versus a different law in New South Wales and Queensland, although the Queensland and New South Wales ones are quite similar. But all of them point towards the duty of care we have over contractors and the requirement we have to make sure they are working safely because they're workers under the legislation. And so that's why we do it. Now, we have come up with the most simple way we could possibly design to audit and inspect our contractors. And what that is a form in Lucidity where we can review what they do and check that they're doing it safely. Now, the reason we do this again, as I say, is to fulfill the requirements of the safety legislation and the standard and all those things. But the purpose is to look for evidence that is definitive, to prove that there's processes in place. Process is the most important ingredient in safety. You can't just wing it and hope for the best. You have to take every step that you can to do the right thing. And you'll see and hear concepts like due diligence. That's all about process. It's all about making sure you've done everything you possibly can to make sure you're following the correct and safest process. And I put this image up because this is a case that is very relevant that I like to talk about when I discuss auditing, because it was a case of Bocaz, the name of the prosecuted party. He was a worker. He was a specialist extrusion machine repair worker. His job was to go out to sites, find machines like the ones in the picture, synthetic grass extrusion machines, and repair them. And on one day, he went into a factory unknown to him, started work on the machine, went to get some tools from his car, and another factory worker who happened to be passing by touched something in the machine and it exploded and caused him serious injuries. The courts looked at it and ruled that the worker had done the wrong thing because he hadn't done the basic steps to keep everyone safe. Should have turned the thing off, should have put a warning sign out, should have put cones around or something, told other people what was going on. And so he had a $30,000 fine that was waived because he had no ability to pay it. He was still charged $30,000 in court costs and given a criminal conviction. And that was in New South Wales nearly 10 years ago. So the penalties would be far increased now. And that's what faces every single one of us when we do our job, if we don't do our job to process. The reason we have developed a safe work method statement for our install activities, whether they're contractors or direct workers involved, is to set those processes clearly there so that we follow them. And if something goes wrong, we can say, I'm sorry, I followed every step in the process. That was an unforeseeable accident, rather than, oh, well, 9 times out of 10, we get lucky. So we are doing this to protect you, to protect our installers, to protect our contractors and our clients as well. So when we do this, we need to be extremely clear. We need to look for evidence. We need to be clear on what that evidence is. We need to take this seriously, take photos if we can, hence the app, and provide a genuine audit that we can use to build and grow from. Because audits will always find problems, and that's what we want. We want to find issues so we can develop from them. We don't want everything looking wonderful. We want to find things before they become problems. And sometimes everything is wonderful, but there's always something to improve. So when you open the app, and I won't show you on this because I've put other videos together on how to use Lucidity, which you may have used and you may not need. If you do, reach out, please. The administration questions are first. When you open the app, open this form up and go through it. It'll ask you the name of the contractor or installer. The form is able to be used for an external contractor or our own internal installers because we still have to look at our own internal installers, which may be you. You may need to be assessed as well to make sure you can do this safely. The date and time is critical because sometimes you may need to backdate it if you've watched the observation earlier in the day and you're filling this out at night. Geolocation is there. You can override that to select exactly where you saw it. It might be on the road, it might be in a contractor's place of business. And whether it's on-site or remote, we have an option here to do an on-site in-person audit or to treat this as a remote audit, which might be over a video call. Not ideal, but maybe more important to do one, especially in a remote area, than not. So I'd rather we do remote over the phone audits than miss them entirely. So that's why that's there. But preferably these will be done in person on site, and they'll take 10 minutes at the absolute most. The questions then that need a little bit of explanation, just so you know what we're asking. Has the installer been suitably inducted? That is, is the worker on a site that requires induction? Have they done all the right things? So it might be a mining site or a construction site, and they may have had to go through the induction process. I'm hoping everything in this category is just a clear tick. You should never be on a site of that magnitude without having gone through the correct process. But it's important to ask because it ticks a box that can be very important legally down the road. Now, the next questions relate to swims that you'll see. So the safe work method statement is something Teletrac Navman has adopted. It doesn't have to adopt a swims because a swim is for high-risk construction activities, but it's becoming an industry standard, has done for the last 10 years, that a swims is used to put a work process in place to step through what the risks are and how the work is done properly. It's not necessarily a job task procedure, but it does include all relevant steps. And we've used it as a bit of a job task procedure, really. So contractors can choose to use the Teletrac Navman swims, in which case they must sign it and send it back in. And that's the contract installer team managing that. So don't worry about that. But are they using the Teletrac swims or are they using their own? If they're a group like ARB or one of these more prominent chains of auto electricians, for example, they will generally have their own swims for this sort of activity. Now, the question is, does the swims address all risks on site? That's a really important question because what we're asking there is there anything unforeseeable about this site that the swims doesn't cover? So it's important you read the swims that Teletrac Navman has established to make sure you understand what we're looking at and what it covers. For example, it doesn't cover working in a school. Perhaps one of the customers we work with might be a lease car arrangement that has presence in a school, might be the private school buses we're doing installs on. Suddenly we're in a populated school environment and setting up around children walking between classrooms. It might be a way off thing for me to say that, but these things can happen in different forms. That's not in the swim, so we might need to do a bit extra. So the contractor doing the install or the installer would have to look a bit deeper. And that's where the Take 5 assessment comes in, because that's a standardized industry best practice way of going, okay, what's going on here? Am I missing anything? And we expect that to be done if there are additional risks that haven't been covered in the swim. But typically, standard install, it's going to be straightforward, swims there, it's signed off. Off we go. Simple questions. And you'll notice in the Lucidity app, If you don't click on an additional part or a no, it'll just skip to the next part. Other questions will pop out if you're saying the contractor's own swims they're using, or the swims does not address all the risks on site. So you probably won't see the Take 5 assessment pop up if the swims covers everything. So the questions are designed to only appear when they're necessary. Then we look at emergencies. So we're looking at, is there a first aid kit? Is there a fire extinguisher? It doesn't have to be a yes, because in some cases you don't need one. You don't actually legally need one for the type of work we're looking at. But in some cases you do. That might be site dependent. It might be location dependent. If they're working from their own factory, workshop, typically there will be something, and there should be something. If it's out on the road, potentially, maybe not. I don't mind. It's not something you need to worry about in the moment. The only thing you need to do is record, is there one? And is there one in close proximity? Doesn't necessarily mean it's there in the car. It might mean it's in the workshop in a space a little way away, but you can see the first aid kit sign. So it's a bit of common sense there. And that's why we have the comments in the Lucidity process, because you can click, no, there's no first aid kit, but you can say it's next to a hospital, something like that. And that's important because we're building a picture of what's going on. That's what an audit's about. PPE and traffic control, sometimes it'll be absolutely irrelevant. Other times it'll be critical because they might have set up in a car park where people are driving past, and we need to make sure cones are out, and a bit of thinking's gone into it. So that's what I want you to look at when you look at those questions. A safe work method is the next part. And that means, is the worker doing everything safely? It's useful to understand the swim, obviously, because then you can say, yeah, they're doing the right thing. They haven't just dived in without making sure the brakes are on, making sure the area is safe, haven't bothered to tell anyone what's going on, messy workshop environment like that. And that's why there's a comment there, because I want you to have a look and put down your thoughts. They're following the work safely, and you are best to put a comment in. What I would do is to say, yes, I watched them put out traffic cones and check the area as they set up. Great. No residual risk to the vehicle operator. That's critical. That's your judgment on how they're doing the install. And anyone can do that. I could do that without any technical knowledge, because I can look and say, yep, they haven't wrapped any cords around the brake pedal. There's nothing visible in the way of the driver's vision. They haven't stuck the unit, the display unit, right in the path of the road. Easy. And then, is the installer competent? It's your opinion. You can't say definitively if they're the best or worst installer in the history of installers. You're there to say, yeah, I've watched them do it. I think they're okay to keep going. Nothing that's a red flag for me. And comment if you think there are things that they need to improve upon. And I put this photo, generic stock photo off the internet of a messy workshop, copyrighted to someone else. So I'm taking no uh, responsibility. It's not mine, but it's important because it just shows the junk you can see. If you see something like that, that's not a great workplace environment, and you need to make a note of that. It doesn't need to be fixed. You don't have to say, "Oh no, I'm not signing you off until you clear this space." But we're building up a picture, like I said, saying that this installer might need to do some work. There's some concerns about this one. When we come up for our next review, we might think of someone else because we're finding there's issues that are popping up. We have to have a safe workplace. We have to use our authority and our influence to create a safe workplace. And so you picking up things as you go like this, saying, hang on, it's a little bit messy, what do we do about it, is something that as a business we can come back and set some rules around. So to summarize, the form is really simple. You're out there seeing installs all the time. We're grateful that you're helping us do this. It's going to protect you as much as it will protect the business, because it'll show that even at a point in time, you watch someone do a task and you've answered the questions as best you can, made some points, given some notes. If there's anything really concerning, you've raised them. And if you're happy with what they're doing, you praise them and off you go. And that's what an audit is. An audit isn't a catch-all, fix everything, perfect magic solution to problems. It is a point in time capture of evidence to check that we've at least got the capacity to do the right thing. So again, thank you. The form is number 5 in the Lucidity app, and If you have any questions or concerns of how to put this together, your managers will definitely be able to help, and I'm always available too. So thank you.